Science fiction is probably one of my favorite genres of literature to read. I love it when I get to read about fantastic new locales throughout the cosmos, or how the world changes in a century or two, or even 10. It's awesome to see how the imagination comes up with new technologies. I mean, heck, it was only 60 years ago that Captain Kirk was using a flip phone to call for backup and FaceTiming Vulcans, and less than 40 years since Captain Picard was researching ancient Shakespeare on something akin to an iPad. Now we have pocketable devices that practically run our entire lives, and the ability to drum up info or have a video chat with anyone in the world. I'm still waiting for an actual hoverboard though. Instead, Mattel is too busy trying to create a Barbie cinematic universe to care. But this month, I brought in Jeanne Hull, the author of Midgard, to talk about how she got into writing. I hope you enjoy this interview. Right. Jeanne, thank you for joining me on the show. How you doing?
Good, Garrett. How are you?
I'm doing great. So tell me about your work and what you write.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me on your podcast. This was a cool opportunity to talk more about the book and to learn a little bit more about your own writer's journey. So I'm looking forward to our conversation. But I grew up loving to read. And I would hide in my room and read books all day if I was allowed to do it. And my favorite genres were science fiction and historical fiction. And I often alternated back and forth between the two. On the science fiction side of the house, I found myself really intrigued by the science fiction, young adult science fiction from the 1960s and 1970s, which was about stewardship of our habitat. And most of those were post apocalyptic young adult fiction about what would happen if mankind didn't take care of the planet. So I'd always had a passing interest in it, but I didn't end up pursuing that course of study when I went first through high school and then to college. I went to a military academy at West Point, and there wasn't really an opportunity for me to continue that study further, whether it was literature or science fiction more particularly. But I went into other fields. I actually became an academic. My area of expertise is international relations and counterinsurgency, because I drew a lot from my military experience into my academic writing and research. And I realized about 5 years ago that I was really tired of writing nonfiction. I've written a ton of nonfiction, both history and international relations related, and I was tired of it. And I was writing yet another article. I think it was on cybersecurity, and I realized, wow, I don't enjoy writing this. I don't know a lot of people who would enjoy reading this. I've always liked fiction. Why don't I start and see if I could write fiction? So, to make a long story short, I had that conversation with myself and then proceeded to ignore it. And then in 2019, I was at an icebreaker exercise for a Scrum Master certification of all things, where we all had to go around and tell everybody a deep, dark secret about ourselves. And, I like to think of myself as an open book. So I'm like, what am I going to say? What am I going to say? And it got to me, and I just sort of blurted out, I am a closeted novelist. I wasn't planning on saying that, but that's what came out of my mouth. And then I realized it was really true. So I spent the next several months trying to figure out what that meant and what to do with it.
And so the book that you wrote, it's called Midgard.
Yes.
And that falls into that young adult science fiction, almost military sci-fi to some extent, because there is a lot of government military element to it. Tell me more about Midgard.
Like how I got to Midgard from the closeted novelist.
Like the way that the characters talk and everything, it definitely has more of that Western, I would say North American, at least American military side of things.
It absolutely does. So part of that is, it's not open satire. I would never call it a satire, but I have a very dry sense of humor. Mm-hmm. So a lot of my military experiences are parodied in there. Some of them are not. Some of them are actually drawn from real experiences. But a lot of the acronyms for some of the insurgent organizations, for example, the opening chapter is drawn from something called the indoor obstacle course test that all West Pointers have to finish to graduate. There's a lot of references to my military career, my military experiences that are littered throughout the novel. And I deliberately tried to make the language somewhat militaristic as well. And you'll notice there's a significant amount of acronyms, and the terminologies that are used are drawn from my Army experience. The setting for my book is Earth in about a century from now, and mankind has nearly destroyed its habitat. So it's not exactly in hell, but it's not in heaven either. It's purgatory heading towards hell, and I was trying to look for a word that could encompass that concept. And in my research, I came across the term Midgard from Norse mythology, and that's what I decided to name the primary capsule in the capsule program, which is one feature of my novel. And it became kind of a metaphor for what was going on in the book more generally.
Was writing something that you've always been drawn to, or was this something that just became kind of something that you needed to do because of your job requirements?
I think writing has something that's always come more naturally to me than others. You know, some people have a natural aptitude for math or mental math. That is not me. For me, reading, because I was an avid reader, writing came as almost second nature.
Yeah.
And when I was younger, I did used to write short stories. I did used to write poetry, and I kind of lost that part of myself. Nobody ever explicitly told this to me, but I didn't grow up around a lot of authors or writers. In fact, I didn't grow up around any. And it didn't seem to me, based off of the conversations that I had with the adults that were in my life, that I could make a career out of writing. Nobody said, don't try to be a writer, but that was the sense that I got, that like writers end up being poor. You don't want to be poor. That's not a career. That's a hobby, and so on and so forth. So I never really took the idea that I could write for a job seriously until I started doing academic writing. And I thought, oh, okay, academics write. They get paid to do other things. I also enjoy teaching. So this will be a good way to merge my love of writing with, you know, something practical, something that I can do to you know, sustain myself. But it just didn't make me happy. I tried academia after I left the Army. It did not work out. It just wasn't for me. So I've been floating around ever since, trying to find something that really fit, and writing fiction was the first thing that did.
What has been the hardest part, of the biggest challenge in the creation of your work for Midgard?
For me, it's been character development. I think that is my weakness as a writer of fiction. I love world building.
Mhm.
I enjoyed putting together some of the dialogue, but I have a hard time communicating what I see and how I see the characters on the page. And I've used a couple of techniques to help me with that, especially as I look at book 2. But I think it's something that I am just going to have to practice and practice and practice to get really good at.
So we're coming up on the last couple of questions here. The first one is, if you could give any advice for other would-be authors out there, what would you say to them?
Listen to that still small voice inside you that's telling you to write or create or whatever it is, because you won't be happy until you listen to it and bear it out.
How can people get a hold of you, and how can they get a hold of Midgard?
So Midgard, the book, is available wherever books are sold online. It's also available in some local bookstores in the Leesburg, Virginia area, and in the Reno, Nevada area, both of which I consider my hometowns. My website is b-stirred.com, and you can purchase a signed copy directly from me on that website. It's also available in Kindle, and I will have an audiobook out sometime this fall as well.
Well, Jeanne, thank you very much for being on the show. This has been a great conversation.
I really enjoyed being here, Garrett. Thank you so much for inviting me to do this. This was a lot of fun, and I look forward to collaborating with you future.
Awesome. If you're interested in picking up copies of Jeanne's work or to connect with her on social media, you can find those links down in the video description.